What happens when a whole country puts its most dangerous secrets inside a mountain and then dares the world to come get them? For more than a decade, Iran has been doing exactly that, digging deeper every time the outside world gets closer, and the United States has spent billions of dollars building bombs that fall straight through solid rock just to answer one single question. Is anything on Earth actually safe underground? Before we go into that darkness, here is a quick ask. If you love clear, honest breakdowns like this, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and send this to the one friend in your group chat who always argues about whether bunker busters can really work. You know who they are. Now let us talk about why this battle between depth and destruction has quietly become one of the most important arms races on the planet. The story starts in the dark. Deep inside a mountain in Iran, thousands of machines spin through the night, turning raw material into something that could one day reshape the entire Middle East. American. Intelligence agencies have watched this place for years through satellites and spy reports. They have watched trucks go in. They have watched people come out. But for a long time, nobody could do anything about it. The target sat under so much rock that no bomb on Earth could reach it. That was the bet. And for a while, the bet was right. To understand why a nuclear program can survive so long underground, you need to know what enrichment actually is. Enrichment means taking raw uranium and spinning it in thousands of machines called centrifuges until the right amount of the explosive isotope builds up. Those machines are extremely delicate. They are sensitive to vibration, to power loss, to temperature changes. They cannot just be moved around easily. This makes them perfect candidates for going underground. But it also creates a specific weakness. The machines need space, electricity, and constant care. A facility full of centrifuges is a complicated industrial plant hidden inside a mountain. That is a difficult thing to build, but once it exists, it is also a difficult thing to destroy. Deep rock protects against almost every conventional weapon, and that is exactly why Iran built Fordow that way. Iran learned this lesson the hard way. Decades ago, during the war with Iraq, air raids taught Iranian commanders a simple truth. If you build something valuable above ground, the enemy can see it, hit it, and destroy it. But if you carve a hole deep into a mountain, hide the valuable thing at the bottom, and close the door behind you, then an entire air force can fly overhead and do absolutely nothing. So Iran started digging. They dug for decades, and by the time the world began paying serious attention to the nuclear program, the most important parts of it were already sitting under solid rock. The place that changed everything was a facility built inside a mountain near a village called Fordow. When international inspectors finally walked through it, they saw a site built to survive anything. The entrance was buried behind blast doors. The enrichment machines sat inside massive underground chambers. Above them stood layer after layer of hardened rock, thick enough to stop almost anything anyone had ever designed. For years, Iran's leadership called this place untouchable, and they were not just bluffing. They had done the math. International inspectors visited Fordow and reported what they saw. The machines there were designed to produce enriched material that could be used for peaceful power, military weapons, or anything in between. Depending on who you ask, that ambiguity was the entire point. Iran always said the program was peaceful, but the decision to put the machines inside a mountain protected by blast doors and layers of rock sent a different message. You do not hide peaceful machinery under a mountain. You hide things you do not want to lose. So the United States did its own math, and that is where the story gets genuinely interesting. There's a history here that matters. The American military first learned to deal with buried targets during the Gulf War decades ago. Intelligence reports said Iraq was hiding command centers under thick concrete. So the Air Force quickly built a new kind of bomb, one that could penetrate concrete before exploding. That bomb worked. It became the ancestor of today's bunker busters. But Iraq's bunkers were shallow compared to what Iran was building. So when Iran went deeper with Fordow, the Americans had to go back to the drawing board and design something even more absurd. What if you build a weapon that does not explode when it hits the ground? What if you build a bomb that acts like a rock falling from space? The answer was a device so massive that only one aircraft on Earth could lift it. The bomb weighed tens of thousands of pounds. Its outer shell was made of incredibly hard, dense metal designed to do one thing: keep falling. It did not want a big explosion on the surface. It wanted to do something much more difficult. It wanted to punch through the mountain, keep punching, and only then explode, deep inside the chamber where the enemy believes they are safe. That is the moment the entire safe place suddenly becomes a trap. Imagine dropping a piano off a skyscraper. Now imagine that piano made of the strongest metal on Earth, falling at nearly the speed of sound with a warhead inside that only wakes up after it has smashed through hundreds of feet of rock. That is the general idea. And for years, this bomb was one of the most expensive secrets in the American military. Its exact performance was classified. Engineers refused to say exactly how deep it could go, but everyone knew why it existed. It existed for this one story. Guidance is also a huge part of the story. A bomb this big cannot just be thrown out of a plane and hoped for the best. It uses a combination of satellite positioning and internal navigation to steer itself toward a precise point, and the surface. Even if the enemy tries to jam the signal, the bomb has enough built-in intelligence to keep flying on its own. That means the point where the bomb enters the ground is the point where the engineers planned the entry. They do not just want to hit the mountain, they want to hit the exact spot where the rock above the target is thinnest or weakest. Early last year, the bomb finally got the test everyone had been waiting for. A small group of American stealth bombers took off, flew a very long distance, and dropped more than a dozen of these. Giant penetrators on 2 fortified nuclear sites inside Iran. At the same time, a wave of cruise missiles smashed into the surface infrastructure of a third site. Iran's own nuclear officials later admitted that all 3 locations had been hit. For the first time, the theory had become a fact. The bomb worked. A mountain, for the first time in this conflict, was no longer a true shield. Look closely at the timing of that mission. It happened. In the middle of the night, after months of careful planning and rehearsals, the bombers flew halfway around the world, avoiding radar, refueling in secret, and arrived over Iran without giving the air defenses a real chance to react. That is not a simple bombing run. That is a statement. It tells an adversary that their geography no longer protects them. And for the first time, Iran's leadership had to admit to its own people that the mountain was not a guarantee. But here's where the story stops being simple, and I want you to stay with me, because what happened next is the real reason the world is watching this fight so closely. A quieter mission followed months later. The same stealth bombers returned. This time they carried smaller 2,000-pound bombs and struck another site linked to earlier weapons-related research. Analysts compared the new craters with older ones from previous strikes and found the patterns almost identical. When reporters asked American officials whether the heaviest bunker busters were used again, the answer was a careful no comment. Now here is the detail worth sitting with. That particular site had been hit before, years earlier, and then hit again during an even earlier round of fighting. Each time Iran quietly rebuilt it. 3 strikes on the same spot across 3 different years, and each time the site came back. That is not a story about one bomb failing. That is a story about something much more surprising. The will to rebuild the same thing again and again, no matter how many times it gets turned into gravel. Think about what that persistence means. The same site, hit again and again, rebuilt again and again. There are only 2 possible explanations. Either the site has almost no value, and they are just stubbornly rebuilding something useless, which makes no strategic sense, or the site has enormous value and the Iranian government is willing to spend anything, accept any risk, and sacrifice whatever it takes to keep it. All the evidence points to the second explanation, and that matters because it tells you something important about how any future negotiation will go. Iran does not abandon these facilities easily, but here's a quick favor before we continue. If this deep dive is the kind of content you actually want more of, subscribe right now. And comment 1 word. Deeper if you think Iran's strategy is working, or closer if you think America is catching up. I will be reading them. Iran does not just hide nuclear equipment underground. It hides its entire arsenal that way. Over the years, analysts have identified what they call underground missile cities. Enormous tunnel networks spread across the country, filled with ballistic, missiles, attack drones, and mobile launchers, all connected by long corridors that allow weapons to move around completely hidden from satellites. Some of these tunnel entrances are actually visible from space. You can see the openings carved into the mountainside. But that does not help as much as you would think. An entrance is just a door. The rooms that actually matter can sit hundreds of meters deeper, connected by tunnels that curve and bend specifically to stop a single strike from destroying the whole network. One bomb going off at a doorway simply does not touch the missiles waiting far inside. Iran has even released its own footage showing these tunnels. Rows of missiles lined up in the dark, launch trucks parked and waiting. The message is clear. You can see the door, but you cannot reach the prize. There is a reason these tunnel networks work as a military concept. Missiles stored underground can be moved on mobile launchers, emerging from one tunnel entrance, firing, and then driving back inside before an enemy can find them. Some networks are designed with multiple exits, spread over a wide area, while the storage chambers stay near the center, protected by hundreds of feet of rock. This makes the entire network very frustrating to target. You can strike 10 entrances and still never touch the missiles hidden in the middle. The only way to defeat it is either to collapse the entire mountain, which is almost impossible with conventional bombs, or to know exactly where the missiles will be at, the exact moment they emerge. So American planners went back to work. In a separate operation focused specifically on missile networks, stealth bombers dropped dozens of smaller penetrator bombs on deeply buried missile launch sites. These bombs were built for high-volume strikes, hammering one location after another until the tunnels collapse. And not long after that, the campaign escalated again. Senior military officials confirmed that American forces had dropped a newer 5,000-pound penetrator into underground storage sites holding coastal defense missiles near a vital waterway. That strike reportedly marked the first time this specific weapon was ever used in combat. Now think about that for a second. The previous weapon of this kind had been sitting in service since the early 1990s. 3 decades passed. Then, the very first time the new generation of penetrators saw combat, it was against an Iranian mountain. That is not a coincidence. That is a weapon waiting in storage for the exact kind of target it was built to destroy. There is another detail that tells you even more. After the first major strikes, the Air Force placed new orders for more of the heaviest bunker busters. The earlier missions had consumed a meaningful share of the stockpile, and the military wanted it back. That simple fact shows how seriously planners are taking this fight. They are not treating the strikes as a one-time event. They are treating hardened underground targets as a permanent problem that will be around for decades. Now, let us go deeper into the part of the story that changes everything. South of an Iranian city, in the middle of a mountain range, sits a missile complex that became one of the most bombed strategic locations of the entire war. According to multiple reports, stealth bombers and heavy bombers struck that one site around 20 separate times. They targeted entrances, storage chambers, launch areas, and the buried corridors connecting them. Satellite images taken after the strikes showed collapsed tunnels, scorched slopes, and craters everywhere. Some strikes caused secondary explosions, giant fireballs that could only mean one thing. The bombs had found something valuable inside the mountain, fuel or ammunition or both. If you only looked at those images, you would be certain the site was done for, finished, a mountain full of broken rock. But here is the twist. The operations did not stop. Construction equipment showed up within days. Bulldozers cleared debris. Repair crews repaved destroyed access roads. At one base, satellite imagery from a few months ago showed about 10 construction vehicles working at the same time to reopen a blocked tunnel entrance. At another nearby site, engineers had already gotten 2 sealed entrances working again. And by early this year, one satellite image actually caught a dump truck filling in the remaining craters, like a road crew doing ordinary maintenance, not an emergency, just a Tuesday. Now think about the math. One phase of these bunker buster strikes against Iranian underground facilities reportedly cost somewhere in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Just one phase. And all Iran needed to undo the damage was a couple of bulldozers, some concrete, and a dump truck. The most expensive precision weapons on the planet were being used to create holes that a local construction team could fill in before the bombers even finished flying home. That is the kind of lopsided equation that keeps military planners awake at night. A resident who lived near that mountain described the experience in the most ordinary way possible. They said the mountain got bombed almost every night. Smoke rose into the sky. And then, the next morning, missiles came out of that very same mountain range again, night after night, months on end, almost 20 strikes, collapsed entrances, secondary explosions. And still, missiles kept launching. Think honestly about what that does to the people living down there. After a while, explosions stop being an emergency. They become background noise. The bombing stops being the story and quietly becomes the weather. That is a part of this war that no satellite image and no official briefing can ever capture. So, did America prove that underground weapons are never safe? Or did Iran prove the exact opposite? Based on everything reported so far, the answer is yes to both. It depends entirely on which target you are looking at, and that brings us to a completely different example from the same war. Earlier this year, during a rescue operation for a downed American aircrew, a senior American commander made a real-time decision. Intelligence had already located an underground headquarters belonging to Iran's Revolutionary Guard near the capital. The commander ordered a strike using the heaviest bunker busters in the American arsenal. Multiple reports say the headquarters was destroyed completely. Other bombers dropped smaller bombs around the area to push back ground forces while the rescue happened. Now think about what made this mission different from the mountain complex. This was not a routine strike package working through a long list. This was one confirmed target, one strike, total confidence in what sat underneath, a single specific room buried underground. And it was gone. Compare the two missions side by side. At the mountain missile complex, the target was an entire range full of interconnected tunnels, dozens of entrances, and the real problem was figuring out which ones mattered. Near the capital, the target was one building, already located, already confirmed, and protected by the urgency of an active rescue. Same type of weapon, same physics, completely different outcomes because the intelligence picture was completely different. And that right there is the real pattern underneath all of this. Large distributed tunnel networks, built to store and move missiles, have shown they can absorb an enormous amount of punishment. Because you cannot permanently seal an entire mountain with craters when the enemy is willing to send in bulldozers within days. But single, high value, precisely. Located targets have been destroyed almost every single time. Quantity beats precision when the target is spread across a mountain range. Precision beats depth when the target is one specific room. That is the whole story in 2 sentences. If you're still with me, you clearly care about understanding the real mechanics behind the headlines. So do me one favor. Leave the word depth in the comments if you think Iran can keep outrunning the bombs. Leave the word precision if you think the Americans will find a way. Then, subscribe so you do not miss the next part, because this race is not slowing down. Now imagine sitting inside an Iranian planning meeting. If you are the person deciding where to store the surviving missiles after more than a year of bombing, the lesson you take from that mountain complex is not that tunnels are useless. The lesson is that tunnels work as long as you repair them faster than your enemy can destroy them. That strategy works right up until the moment American intelligence becomes specific enough to know exactly which room to hit, which is exactly what appears to have happened with the Revolutionary Guard headquarters. So the real arms race quietly happening under this war is not just about who can dig deeper. It is about whether Iran can keep its most important assets moving and mixed in with the rest of the network faster than American intelligence can figure out which tunnel actually matters most. That is a race. And right now, it is very close. Here is another thing worth understanding. The whole world is watching. Every future adversary watching this war is learning the same 2 lessons at once. Distributed, redundant, quickly repairable tunnel networks can absorb a shocking amount of precision fire and keep functioning. But once intelligence narrows things down to one specific high-confidence target, no amount of depth has reliably stopped the heaviest bunker buster from finishing the job. Those 2 lessons are worth more to future military planners than almost anything else this war has produced. If you are a military planner in any country with an underground program, you are taking notes right now. The lesson is not that bunkers are useless, nor that bunker busters are unstoppable. The lesson is more practical. The outcome depends on the intelligence picture, the target structure, and the enemy's willingness to keep repairing. That is a complex equation, and governments around the world are quietly adjusting their plans, making their networks more distributed, their entrances more redundant, their tunnels more repairable. Meanwhile, American engineers are working on the next generation of penetrators, looking for a way to make bombs that go even deeper. The race does not stop. It just keeps moving down. And that is exactly why the newest, deepest facility in this whole story matters more than any single strike report. This facility is not just Iran hiding equipment from one bomb. This is Iran, and quite possibly other governments watching from a distance, quietly calculating exactly where the line currently sits between distributed resilience and precise destruction. Then building the next thing on the far side of that line. Every war teaches the next war something. This underground fight is teaching a lesson that will not stay confined to one country. Here is where the story gets even more serious. According to the most recent reporting, the nuclear file recently moved on 2 separate fronts at once. Thousands of uranium enrichment centrifuges were moved into a newly built underground complex. Satellite imagery reportedly shows that this site was carved more than 100 meters below solid bedrock. That is deeper than the original facility that started this entire chapter. And it is apparently deep enough to be out of reach of even the most advanced bunker-busting weapons in the American arsenal today. International nuclear inspectors have demanded answers about activity at this site. Iran says it is just a centrifuge production and assembly facility. No enrichment there. They denied any nuclear activity as recently as this past week. Meanwhile, American officials have publicly warned that the complex could be struck if necessary. This is where the legal and diplomatic layers get strange too. International inspectors have the right to inspect declared nuclear sites. But this new complex has reportedly never been inspected. Iran says there is no nuclear activity there, so there is nothing to see. American officials say the site is part of the nuclear program and could be hit. That standoff sits right at the center of the current crisis. And every week that passes without an inspection or strike only deepens the uncertainty. Now, the name of this place matters. According to multiple reports, the name translates roughly to the word for the simplest hand tool you could possibly use to dig into the earth. That is not subtle. That is Iran, deliberately telling anyone paying attention. This hole sits below everything you can reach. We know it. You know it. And we built it anyway. Sit with that for a moment. After the nuclear strikes, after the missile tunnel campaign, after 20 strikes on one mountain complex, after a confirmed strike on an underground headquarters near the capital, Iran's response was not to stop burying things deep. It was to dig deeper than before. specifically deeper than the point where American weapons are currently confirmed to work. That tells you something important about how Iranian planners think. They do not wait for America to prove a facility is vulnerable. They study what worked against the last one, calculate where the bombs can and cannot reach, and design the next facility to sit beyond that line. And here is the timing detail that makes this so interesting. The transfer of centrifuges reportedly began months before the most intense bombing campaigns of this year. That means Iranian planners were already assuming that their old facilities would eventually be defeated. So they moved first. They did not wait around to find out. They simply went deeper. America proved it could reach one depth. Iran's answer was to build a new depth immediately. This is exactly how an arms race gets born. Someone builds a protected fortress. Someone else builds a bomb to crack it. The first builder responds by making the fortress even deeper. The cycle repeats with no natural ending. And every time the cycle repeats, the stakes get higher. Now let us not forget that all of this is happening while the war above ground continues. As of the most recent reporting, strikes continued night after night against Iranian command centers, drone storage facilities, communication networks, coastal surveillance sites, and maritime capabilities. Iranian media reported blasts in multiple locations and casualties in at least one province. It is absolutely necessary to remember that behind every one of these strikes, underground or above ground, are real people. People who work in these facilities, guard them, live near them, and in some cases, die near them. Whatever you think about the strategic value of any individual strike, that human cost is real. It does not show up in satellite imagery. It shows up in a small line in a local news report that most of the world scrolls past. Something else appeared in that recent target list. For the first time in this phase of the campaign, command and control nodes were listed as the leading priority, ahead of coastal and maritime targets. That shift matters, because it shows military planners have learned the same lesson from the underground fight and are applying it above ground. Dispersed infrastructure can always be rebuilt, but the command nodes, the specific rooms where actual decisions get made, cannot be rebuilt nearly as easily once the people and equipment inside them are gone. Both underground and above ground, the pattern points in the same direction. There is one more piece to this puzzle that we have to put in place before we finish. Iran reportedly rejected a recent ceasefire proposal carried to Tehran through regional diplomatic channels. Read that again. Rejected. If Iranian leadership truly believed its buried infrastructure was about to collapse, you would expect urgency at the negotiating table, not confidence. Instead, Iran is acting like a country that believes its deepest facilities will simply outlast the war. And from their side of the table, that is not an irrational bet. Every negotiation carries real costs. Concessions on missiles, on enrichment, on regional influence. Every month spent digging deeper also carries costs, in resources, and in exposure. But if the newest complex really does sit beyond the reach of the current American arsenal, then Iran has essentially bought itself time without giving up anything important. That seems to be the calculation being made in Tehran, right? Now, so what is the fair, honest picture after everything we have walked through? The United States has proven beyond any doubt that it can locate and destroy a specific, high-value underground target when intelligence is precise enough. The Revolutionary Guard headquarters strike is the proof. But America has also learned the hard way, across 20 strikes on one mountain complex, that large distributed tunnel networks can be seriously damaged without ever being truly stopped. Because concrete and bulldozers are cheap, dump trucks are cheap. The bombs that make craters are not. And now Iran has responded to both lessons at the same time by building something designed to sit beyond the demonstrated reach of the weapon that started this entire story. That is the core tension. Did the United States prove that nothing buried underground is safe anymore? In one specific high-value case, yes, absolutely. But did it prove that everything Iran wants to protect is now within reach? Not yet. And Iran is betting its entire remaining nuclear program on that gap. We are almost at the end, but before we land, I need one more thing from you. Share this video with one person who loves military history but hates the usual oversimplified explanations. Send it to them. Let them see the part you found most interesting. And if you have not already, subscribe. The story is still moving and the next chapter will be here sooner than you think. So here is the real question I want you to carry with you after this video ends. If that newest complex really does sit deeper than anything the current American arsenal has been confirmed to defeat, does that mean Iran has finally found the depth that wins? Or does it just mean that the next weapons program already has its very first target picked out in advance? Based on the pattern we have watched repeat itself again and again, I genuinely do not believe this is the last mountain we will be talking about. One honest note before you go. Everything in this breakdown comes from cross-checking defense reporting and mainstream coverage against each other. In places where the sources disagreed, like officials declining to confirm exactly which bomb was used at a particular site, I left that uncertainty in place instead of covering it with pretending to be a fact. A story about weapons this powerful, aimed at targets this deep, deserves that level of care, especially when the honest answer is more complicated than any single headline, and especially when the people who actually live near these mountains, on every side of this war, deserve a version of the story that does not just tell them whatever sounds most dramatic. Thanks for staying all the way to the end. The next video is already being researched, and I think you are going to want to see it. I will see you in the next one.